Okay, do a little short one here again. Like to talk about CSOs, combined sewer overflows. A lot of people have no idea what they are or what that even means. If you're in a more populated area of the United States, especially one that was populated fairly densely before, say, 1850, 1870, somewhere around there, all your older cities, mostly on the East Coast, but also some on the West Coast, there's a good chance that you have combined sewer overflows. Now, back in the day, people didn't have indoor plumbing. Even in cities. Cities had wells, cities had outhouses. It was during the 1800s that we were starting to get more of water going to homes, and also it was into the early 1900s when people were actually starting to plumb the outhouses. And yeah, that's right. They were plumbing the outhouses first. If your house doesn't have a bathroom, but it has an outhouse, usually the first way to convert things over instead of building on an addition was just to plumb the existing outhouse. I've seen a lot of old water installation records that actually show that going into the 20s and even the 1930s to some extent. But at any rate, when cities were built, and even towns, the first thing they worried about was drainage. So all these places had storm sewers, to some extent at least, to drain the runoff from the streets and such. And then whenever people started getting indoor plumbing, getting toilets installed and sinks and everything, started having to worry about where that water would go. Now, some places ran a separate sanitary sewer from the get-go, but not all of them did. A lot of them just ran that sanitary flow from the toilets and the sinks and the showers and the bathtubs and everything to the existing storm drainage. It was kind of the cheapest and easiest method, so that's what they went with. Whenever, you got to figure, for a long time, even the ones that had the separate sanitary system, it just went to the nearest creek. There wasn't really a whole lot of sewage treatment at all until you started getting into the 1920s or 30s. It was just starting to really become prevalent. Pittsburgh, which is the big city closest to where I'm from, they didn't have sewage treatment until after World War II. They were talking about it before World War II. The war came along. It got kicked down the road. Elkasan was designed and built after World War II. So you're basically talking the late 50s by the time it was starting to actually come online. Until that point in time, all the sanitary flow from the city just went straight into the river. And that's not uncommon. It's not, it happened in Cleveland. It probably happened in, San Francisco, Washington, D.C., all over the country. The older cities, a lot of them had this issue. And part of the reason why they went with tying into the storm source then, and part of the reason why they still have these systems now, is because it's just cost prohibitive to dig up every street in the city and lay down all new sewers. I mean, it's an awful lot. I mean, Pittsburgh, I think, is 35 square miles. That's and it's not the largest city by area or population by any means that has this problem. So it's a big problem. But when you did get the sewage treatment installed, well, the sewage plant can't treat infinity, so when you got a storm coming through, you had to divert the water somewhere. So most of these sewers still, they're piped all the way to the river still, but they got some sort of a a diversion that kicks the normal flow over to go on its merry way to the sewage treatment plant. Don't want to go off on too much of a tangent with exactly how it does that. but usually you got another pipe that's deeper down that it kicks over and drains to. There's different ways of doing it. There's tipping valves. Some of them are just a simple weir type dam. Some of them have some sort of an orifice, but any excess flow, if it rains, still kicks past that, goes out into the river. And theoretically, the bulk of that water is rainwater, but at the same time, it's basically washing out everything that's been collecting in that sewer. And this is a bad thing. And a lot of people just, they don't understand what it is. You'll see, if you go along the rail trails that they've got for the bikers and the joggers in Pittsburgh that run along the edge of the river, every now and then you'll see, you know, these signs that say something about a CSO, and people don't always know what that is, but basically, yeah, you got raw sewage going out into the river every time it rains, and, you know, goes downstream to the next guy downstream, and, you know, the only real way to fix it is to actually run separate sewers, but like I said, that's cost prohibitive. Right now they're trying to do a lot to try to get as much of that stormwater out, get any groundwater out, and you know, it's not just Pittsburgh, it's all over the country. There's a big push for, you know, green infrastructure and this and that and the other thing, trying to get as much of that rainwater out as you can, but it's really hard to do because you got to tear everything up. No matter what you're building, you got to tear up an awful lot of stuff to put it in. There's also, you know, using some sort of tank so that when it rains, it kind of goes into the tank and then kind of slowly comes back into the sewer. So it goes to the treatment plant at a rate that the treatment plant can handle. Some treatment plants are dealing with this, and also just having really leaky sanitary sewers with having like a batch plant where, you know, if it rains, it goes to these big lagoons, and it's basically you've got holding tanks at the treatment plant, but the difference being that they will actually treat the sewage in these lagoons separately instead of then release it as treated water rather than grabbing it in a tank and then slowly putting it in the conventional treatment system. Conventional treatment is more of an ongoing process than a batch type process. That's why it you know, it gets overwhelmed. You know, if it only functions at, you know, 1 million gallons a day, if you suddenly get 3 million gallons coming there in a certain day, it just, you know, washes out all the microbes, overwhelms things. Sometimes, in some cases, just you know, literally the pipes and the tanks and that can't hold the volume of water coming from some of these storms. But at any rate, that's a simple overview. I'm trying to keep it short, so I'm under my 15-minute limit here. Hopefully I can post longer videos soon.